Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It's Sunday, November 26, 2023. Let's talk about what happened in David Benavidez' stoppage of Demetrius Andrade. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, it's at a moment like this, when everyone's giddy, when everyone says, hey, I knew Benavidez would win. Benavidez delivered. I thought he would win, right? But it's very important to revisit our betting philosophy. I know many of you disagree with it, right, folks? I continue to believe, after seeing the fight, that from an odds perspective, and this is what I think of when I'm placing bets, the Demetrius Andrade side of the play was the correct side of the play, right? When you're getting 3-1 odds on the cagey vet who, quite frankly, has certain benefits the other guy can't match, right? I believe Andrade showed you that he has much faster hands, and I mean much faster hands than Benavidez. I believe Andrade showed you that he could fight different styles, that he could even get in the pocket and back up Benavidez, right? Knockouts cause amnesia. After the fact, we always say, hey, I knew this guy would win the fight. The reality is that if these guys fought 10 times, in my opinion, that's after seeing them in the ring together, I'm not sure if Benavidez would win 6 of the 10. In other words, anything above a plus 150 is a gift, particularly in this fight, where you understood that Andrade needed to win the early rounds to have a chance, where you understood that for Andrade, winning the early rounds and being ahead on the scorecards going into the 8th, 9th, 10th rounds was paramount, and that if he pulled that off, Benavidez would need a stoppage to win the fight. You also realize, too, that the Benavidez-Caleb Plant fight was a bit of an optical illusion, right? As I said in a pre-fight video here, Benavidez was fighting 2 men that night, Caleb Plant and the referee, right? Benavidez would come inside, would throw big shots. This is particularly in the second half of the fight. Then the ref would jump in. Benavidez, who's a closer, look at his record. Most of his knockouts come in the first 9 rounds. Benavidez, who's a closer, wasn't given an opportunity in the Caleb Plant fight to close the show. So here, just looking at the betting spreads, looking at the fact that the over-under was something like 10.5 rounds, way too high for a Benavidez fight, you understood the scenarios here, right? One of them would have been Andrade jumps out to a lead. Benavidez has to make the comeback, just like he did in the Caleb Plant fight. Only here he's fighting a better fighter than Caleb Plant, right? Andrade is very two-handed, right? Andrade is a southpaw. Andrade is tricky. Andrade, and you didn't see it in this fight, but Andrade can actually channel Vitaly Klitschko and can lean back on shots, right? Andrade is tricky. And you understood, if Andrade built the lead that Caleb Plant did against Benavidez, Benavidez would need a stoppage. If the fight went over 10.5 rounds, you understood Andrade would stand a good chance of winning this fight by decision. Now understand, I say this as a guy who made multiple videos here online predicting that Benavidez would win the fight. But just understand, in boxing, more so than other sports, there's a greater amount of uncertainty, right? A puncher only has to be right once. Understand, a mover, if he can frustrate the puncher, only has to put together a stretch of rounds where the puncher has to get desperate and then starts walking into shots. Right? I believe it's because the public has a misperception of the sport. And this is a sport where upsets happen every 2 months. Right? Didn't Zhili Zhang beat Joe Joyce? Right? Just think it through. You know, every year there are many upsets. Guys who you thought were unbeatable end up getting beaten. You know, one of Benavidez' heroes is Mike Tyson. Just understand, there's a stretch of Tyson's career where we thought Tyson was unbeatable. Right? Recognize that Tyson was going off at a greater than 30-1 favorite when he fights Buster Douglas. That's how preposterous it was. Understand that he not only loses to Buster Douglas, folks, he loses to Evander Holyfield twice. Right? Twice. Right? As I like to tell people, Iran Barkley beat Thomas the Hitman Hearns twice. Styles make fights. Some fighters have off nights. Upsets happen. The hedge here took a lot of the risk out of the bet. When I'm getting an unbeaten, that's who Boo Boo was, unbeaten multiple champion, and the casino's silly enough to give me greater than a plus 300, I need to grab that casino mispricing. It allows me to then bet more on Benavidez. Understand the alternative. Casual fans went to the betting window and they paid more than a minus 350 on Benavidez. Bet more than $350 to win 100. Right? The hedge I was recommending, believe it or not, you got positive, better than even money odds on both halves of the play. Right? You got a plus 300. Right? 3 times even money for Andrade. Then you got a better than even money on the under 10.5 rounds. This fight doesn't make it to the 7th round. Now let's talk about the fight, folks. This was a better fight than advertised. I mean, the actual fight. I know it's a short fight, but there's a lot going on here. Speaking of Mike Tyson, you remember Mike Tyson, Larry Holmes? That's an interesting fight, where Larry, who of course had been retired, gets lured back in the ring, and you actually notice that while Tyson is younger, hits harder, is well prepared, knows how to move his head, right, has his hands up here for defense, you notice that Larry Holmes is trying out different styles in that fight. And as you're seeing it unfold, you realize that prime Larry Holmes, not the old guy coming out of retirement. By the way, that old guy, look this up, beats Ray Mercer in Mercer's prime. And understand, Mercer gives Lennox Lewis one of his toughest fights. Right? Larry, the old man, comes back. This is even after the Tyson fight, and beats Ray Mercer. But as you're watching it, you understood that Larry Holmes was testing Mike Tyson. He even allows Mike to take the lead. Well, here, you have a shocker early in this fight. It's well put together, folks. Andrade, who's 6'1", and that's one of the problems here, right? You can't look at Andrade's performance and draw an analogy to Canelo, who is 5'7", in his bare feet, right? I know they say he's 5'8", 5'9", right? He grows before fights like NFL draft prospects grow before the combine, right? But just understand, Canelo is half a foot or so shorter than Andrade. But understand what Andrade does here. And understand, I'm a fan of both fighters. It's not like I'm hating on Benavidez. Andrade comes out and Andrade decides he's going to fight small. Right? You notice Andrade is the better athlete. Well, he comes out, he fights small. Benavidez, who's super prepared, has a problem with it. It's a shock because everyone expected Andrade to be on his back foot, to be moving away from the pocket, not to be in the pocket but low. Tell us your scorecards in the comment section of this video. I thought the first round was a draw. I thought Andrade in this short fight takes the second round. So Andrade comes out, has success. Right? If you're trying to do an assessment of Benavidez against Canelo, just understand, Canelo could come in fighting low, force Andrade to reach for him. Force Benavidez to reach for him. And that would be a problem for Benavidez. What I want people to do too, and don't get me wrong, I think Benavidez beats Canelo. But it's complicated. There, the odds would matter just like they matter here. Right? Depending on the odds, who knows? Maybe Canelo would be the betting side of the play. And I say that thinking Benavidez beats him. Right? But just understand, I want people to revisit the end of the Canelo fight against Kovalev. Then the light heavyweight champion, one division up. The last left hook Canelo throws. Right? The punch right before Canelo ends the fight with a straight right hand. Folks, that left hook would be the best punch that either Benavidez or Canelo has. Canelo has ring coverage on his left hook. That left hook is one of the best punches in boxing. Just understand, if Canelo, who's 5'7", decides to fight low, right? And we've all seen the super fight film between Ali and Rocky Marciano, another guy who would bend over and fight low. If Canelo fights low, and if Benavidez is forced to reach for him, and if Benavidez gets a little careless in reaching for him, because keep in mind, Benavidez is a right-handed fighter. Canelo's left is his lead punch. In other words, all that would need to happen is Benavidez throws a right hand that misses Canelo and has Benavidez leaning forward for Canelo to make that left hook a difference maker in that fight. Well, understand, the first 2 rounds of this fight are must watch if you're trying to come up with a blueprint on how to beat Benavidez, because Benavidez is bothered. He is bothered by 6'1". Demetrius Andrade fighting low, hanging around the pocket. Let me say something else too, and it's interesting. It's an interesting moment in the fight. Believe it or not, it's Andrade who decides he's going to come inside and clinch Benavidez. Now, Andrade's not hurt at the time. This is strategy. This is early in the fight. Andrade is alert. Fight's just started. He's not semi-conscious or, dealing with getting hit in the head. No, it's early in the fight. So Andrade comes inside to clinch Benavidez, and Benavidez, who's big for 168. You understand that the 168 is artificial for Benavidez. You know that just looking at the weigh-in. Looking at how drained the brother looked at the weigh-in. Believe it or not, when Andrade, who's supposed to be the mover here, look at his fight against Demon Nicholson, where he's practically circling an Olympian. Right here, Andrade comes in with strategy. So Andrade's fighting low. Then Andrade comes in on slugger Benavidez to clinch him. And you'll notice that Benavidez does not want to be clinched. It's interesting strategy by both men. Benavidez reaches back. They actually get a little bit tangled, and Benavidez isn't a George Foreman type guy. Hugging you and leaning on you, trying to drain your energy, using their size to drain you in clinches. No, this is the opposite. Benavidez, against a mover, does not want to be clinched. Right? The two guys actually have a lot of respect for each other. So you'll actually notice as Benavidez moves away from Andrade out of the clinch, Andrade looks at him as if to say, hey, bro, what's up? Benavidez did not want to be clinched in this fight. Well, let's talk about some other stuff Andrade does. In the third round, I'll name the round. Believe it or not, Andrade backs Benavidez up to the ropes. Right? Benavidez, who's interesting, because you have the same type of occurrence in the David Lemieux fight, and that's an important fight. Because if you're handicapping Canelo against Benavidez, understand Lemieux has a world-class left hook as well. And in that fight, and that's a short fight, Benavidez, who I'm telling you is a boxing nerd, he knows what he wants to do from the opening bell. Benavidez lets Andrade put him up against the ropes. Benavidez's back hits the ropes, just like it did shortly before he stops David Lemieux. So folks, you're looking at this fight and it's a lot of chess. Understand, both of these guys are very strategic. This was a fight where Andrade is in, who knows what he had planned for the later rounds. Andrade is in and he has a different strategy than almost anyone else did against Benavidez. Now the third round turns because then, of course, Benavidez starts landing shots, right? And it's clear that Andrade is surprised by David Benavidez's punching power. It's also clear, too, that Benavidez throws shots at odd angles, right? So Benavidez will come up and it's hard to predict the angles of his shots. They're not wide shots. They're narrow shots. But he throws them with a little bit of a hook. On the telecast, and I thought the commentator did a great job. The commentator actually says, Benavidez is throwing some shots like Golovkin would throw them. Now, I need for people to understand the situation here. Benavidez was a prodigy in boxing. Research is past. So when Golovkin was ruling the roost as middleweight champion, and Golovkin's reign is glorious, just look at the knockouts in a row he has as middleweight champion. There's a stretch there where Golovkin's primary sparring partner was a young David Benavidez. I know Benavidez is something like 26 now and stuff like that. He was sparring with Golovkin when he was like 19 or 20. So this is a guy who throws punches and understands that if he can throw punches with a twist on them, right? Not wide looping shots. This isn't the guy trying for home runs and stuff like that. No, this is the guy with heavy hands who's throwing these kind of like sliders at you with both hands. They get in. they get in on Andrade. Right? So just understand, folks, Andrade, to me, is winning the fight at the end of the second round. Right? The first half of this fight, the first 3 rounds, is really a standoff. Then we get to the 4th round, and things start to fall apart. Right? For Andrade. By the time you get to the end of the 5th round, you notice Andrade's eyes look puffed up. And we, the fans, are wondering if Andrade is going to come out for the 6th round. Right? Understand, too, Andrade gave interviews where he talked about how he needed to control the early rounds of the fight. You have a big problem. It's huge. When you're the mover and your strategy is to get a lead, then to outlast the slugger, make it to the finish line and win a decision. You have a problem when at the end of the 6th round, you've been battered, right? You've lost 4 of the first 6 rounds. In other words, Andrade would have had to have, a 4-2 lead. Means that Andrade would have had to have won 4 rounds of the final 6 when he was getting blasted. Let me also point out something else too, and it's great to see. Benavidez is not the only body puncher in this fight. Andrade is committed to landing shots on Benavidez' body. He's committed. And I'm just telling you, it gives Benavidez problems. So don't let knockouts cause amnesia here. I want people to revisit this fight, and I want them to just look at the styles that Andrade is throwing at Benavidez. Right? Let me say this too, and I don't say it lightly. There's a moment in this fight where the whole thing could have changed. Andrade gets next to Benavidez. Benavidez is looking the other way. Andrade loads up and throws a chopping punch that Benavidez is unprepared for. It's a headshot. But Andrade gets the angle wrong and misses the punch. Folks, had he landed that shot, and let's remember, he puts down Demon Nicholson when those two fought. Had he landed that shot, this fight could well have been different. So, my advice to gamblers, and I know here, there are going to be many people who say, why did I pay for a hedge on Demetrius Andrade? My argument is the opposite. If you know you're dealing with a great fighter, right, folks? Had Andrade beaten Benavidez, he'd be a Hall of Fame candidate. Look at his resume. Right? His problem is that he didn't fight the popular, well-known champions. Right? But any time you get in this uncertain sport, betting's uncertain. The future's always unpredictable. Always has some unpredictability. Anytime the casino is trying to make a line, is trying to get equal money on both sides, and they're silly enough to give you a plus 300 on an underdog like Demetrius Andrade, I believe your response has to be, thank you very much. I will take it. Right? So I thought Andrade fought an inspired fight, but he was outgunned by the difference in punching power. Andrade might well be a better pure boxer than Benavidez. But understand, this is a sport where punching power matters. You can be a slugger, right? No one watching this video thinks that Deontay Wilder is a master boxer in the heavyweight division. But you understand his power more than makes up for any boxing deficit he has against most of his opponents. Right here, let me give Benavidez a lot of credit. He's crafty. But just understand, he's not the only crafty person who was in this fight. Right? Andrade at one point decides he's going to throw combinations. The hand speed is dazzling. Unfortunately for him, Benavidez, during the combinations, then punishes him for tying up both of his hands by hitting him with some hard shots. Right? Unfortunately for Andrade, while he's hitting Benavidez in the body, Benavidez decides he's going to hit Andrade in the body. And the heavier hands mattered more in this fight. Now let me just take a step back. Let me talk about the Canelo situation, and it's a major situation, right? And we understand that Canelo has a lot of options. All roads lead to Canelo, right? Canelo right now is, fighting PBC guys. Jamal Charlo, who came in 3 pounds overweight, and that's an embarrassment because they were already scheduled to fight at a catch weight, 163. In my opinion, you're never going to see Jamal Charlo again at 160 pounds. Right? The brother was out of the ring, and you mean to tell me, after an extended period out of the ring, on a fight with a catch weight of 163, you mean to tell me the brother could not come within 3 pounds of that agreed upon catch weight? Now, Jose Benavidez Jr. decided to go ahead with the match. I understand. Big payday. I also understand, too, that when a guy is that unprepared for a weigh-in, right, and we're talking about Jamal Charlo, right, there is a school of thought where you say, hey, if the guy's that unprepared for the weigh-in, this is the time to fight him because he's going to be unprepared for the fight. Now, Charlo has an excellent trainer, Ronnie Shields, one of my favorites, right? Ronnie goes back to people like Pernell Whitaker, right? Ronnie Shields had his fighter, not weight-wise, but style-wise, ready for the match, right? Just understand the position Canelo's in, right? Benavidez is a PBC fighter. Canelo has already beaten Jamal Charlo. Canelo would have an easy time, in my opinion, taking care of Jamal Charlo, right? That fight would probably be at 168, but understand, Jamal Charlo weighed 166 at the weigh-in yesterday, right? 166. If he was cutting weight to get to 166, you can imagine his real division should be super middleweight. Right, so if Canelo wants an easy payday against an unbeaten fighter, Jamal Charlo was still unbeaten. 5 years from now, if Canelo were to beat Jamal Charlo, we would look at the Canelo resume and we would see that he's the guy who beat an unbeaten Jamal Charlo. Right? Canelo has a lucrative fight against Charlo if he wants. Canelo has an intriguing fight, although that one would have a contractual overhang, against Terence Crawford. Let me say this about Crawford. Crawford is exactly the kind of fighter, in my opinion, who could move up in weight and be successful. Because Crawford is a different fighter in every fight. Just like Demetrius Andrade here is trying out different styles. Understand, Crawford is a guy who isn't married to one style. Also, Canelo has had some fights where there's a debate over whether he actually won. Right? Crawford would be able to dial up the Austin Trout fight. Take a look at that fight. He'd be able to dial up the Erislandy Lara fight. Take a look at that fight. In my opinion, he would even be able to dial up the Miguel Cotto fight. And of course, their fights Canelo actually lost. The Floyd Mayweather fight. The Dimitri Bivol fight. Right? Students of the game, not just Crawford, but Benavidez, David Benavidez, would have a lot to work with. Right, just like Canelo would be looking at the early part of this Demetrius Andrade fight to see how Andrade's decision to come in the pocket low, to fight low, impacted Benavidez. Right, Benavidez and Crawford would be able to sit down with a few tapes to see where Canelo has had challenges. Right? So Canelo holds a lot of cards. But let me just say, it's clear to me that if Canelo wants to show that he is the best at 168 pounds, the man he has to fight is the guy who's already been a champ at 168, who's still unbeaten. And that's David Benavidez. Right? Not Morrell, not any of these other guys. Look, we all know that Dimitri Bivol, who, by the way, Benavidez has sparred with, we all know that Dimitri Bivol is a worthy opponent. Right? He beat Canelo. You know, talent-wise, he's in the conversation. But he's a 175er. You have a guy who's undisputed right now at 168. That's Canelo. You have a situation, it's kind of like an Ali Frazier situation, where you have a guy who's unbeaten, but who's a former champ at 168. Right? It wasn't that the Ali story? He was unbeaten, but yet Joe Frazier was the heavyweight champ because Ali got stripped of his belt? I'm just telling you, Canelo, who's older than Benavidez, as I said, the fight between them's complicated, and who has faded in some fights. That last Golovkin fight, didn't you think the Canelo of the last 2 rounds wasn't the Canelo of the first 5? The Ryder fight, didn't you think that the Canelo of the last 2 or 3 rounds of that fight wasn't the Canelo of the first 5 rounds of that fight? Understand the history, too. You have a Foreman-Ali situation here. Right? Foreman used to spar with Sonny Liston. Foreman was Sonny Liston's protege when Foreman was a young phenom, just like Benavidez. Well, the old guy who sparred extensively with Benavidez was Golovkin. Let's be clear on Canelo Golovkin. I personally feel Canelo lost the first 2 fights to Golovkin. It's even worse than that. After a questionable decision in the second fight. Now, I'm just telling you, I saw the fight at a place that's closed, Hooters, in Campbell, here in Northern California, and it was a Canelo crowd. And at the end of that fight, when they announced the decision, the mood was mixed. Right? First round, it seemed everyone was for Canelo. I was actually nervous because I thought, man, if I start rooting for Golovkin here in this crowd, you know, what's going to happen? Right? As an aside, I was in Mexico for the Chavez-Pernell-Whitaker fight. And there, me and my friends were wondering if we were going to make it out the building. Well, just understand, at the end of the rematch between Canelo and Golovkin, people were groaning and shaking their heads at the end of the fight. Canelo fought a great fight. But the mood was that he lost that fight. Well, just understand, after that, there's a group of people, let me raise my hand, I'm in this group, who believes Canelo then decided not to fight Golovkin again until Golovkin slowed down a bit. Right? I believe Golovkin made a mistake too. Right? When you see a corner and a fighter working to the extent that they were working, Abel Sanchez with Golovkin, right? When Golovkin starts making big money and decides he's going to leave his trainer, folks, you're losing a lot. Let me tell you about history. There's a fight, believe it or not, where Angelo Dundee is in the opponent's corner, Jimmy Ellis's corner, against Ali. Right? They couldn't agree on the money, and Ellis was part of Dundee's stable. You know where Dundee was the fight after that? He was in Ali's corner. Ali was not going to lose his trainer. Right? Well, I'm just telling you, Benavidez is in the position Foreman was in. When Foreman fights Ali, who beat his mentor, Sonny Liston, twice, Foreman's leaving nothing to chance. Foreman comes out, Foreman's going to batter Ali. right? Foreman's not going to be, measured like Liston was the first fight. No. Foreman comes out, he's going to batter Ali. He has a point to prove. I'm just telling you, Benavidez, being a guy who grew up in the ring, sparring with Golovkin, is going to have a point to prove because Canelo is a reference point for both he and his mentor. So let's hope boxing does the right thing here. Let's hope Canelo, who holds all the cards, does the right thing here. I need for people to understand, too, that when you're undisputed, which is who Canelo is at 168, he has some other responsibilities that don't involve Benavidez, right? Benavidez is now his mandatory for one of the belts. But guess what? Canelo has other mandatories, right? That's what happens when you're undisputed. Let's just hope the sky parts, the sun shines through, and we get Canelo Benavidez. That's the fight all of us deserve. Understand, Terence Crawford is certainly a worthy opponent and would be fighting for history. But this is a 168-pound thing. We need to know who is the best at 168 without alibis, right? We don't want to hear after that Jermell Charlo fight, well, he was fighting out of division, right? We don't want to hear that. We want to fight without the addendum, without the excuse, without the explanation for supremacy at 168 pounds. Right? So I do hope people revisit this Andrade Benavidez fight. I believe it's going to age well. Right? I believe the early rounds of the Holmes-Mike Tyson fight for the boxing hardcore are interesting to see how Larry Holmes is trying different styles against Mike Tyson. Right? I believe this fight will age the same way. Right? I don't think Andrade embarrassed himself at all. Rather, I think he opened the door for questions about exactly how to fight Benavidez. Right? The fact that he ends up getting Benavidez on the ropes by being front foot and low in the pocket should be an eye-opener. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Gamblers were taken care of, folks. The under 10.5 rounds delivered. Right? With rounds to spare, that's how hard Benavidez hits. Right? You were taken care of, but understand, I consider this, after the fact, of course, a free swing. Right? You got such huge odds on the Andrade side of the play. And the over-under was so high that this bet made itself. You understood, either Andrade comes out, dominates the early rounds, and then Benavidez would know he needs a knockout. Or you understood Andrade's going to find out that 168's a different world than 154 and 160. And that Benavidez was going to take over and Andrade was going to be all dressed up with nowhere to go in the middle rounds, which is what happened. Right? So this fight made itself with a little creativity. You were able to get away from a ridiculous minus 350 odd line on Benavidez simply to win. Anyway, that's the fight I saw. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Were Benavidez to fight Canelo, I think Benavidez wins, but I believe Canelo could come in low. Canelo also has a back foot. We know that from the first Golovkin fight, right? Canelo could come in low. Canelo could throw a big left hook. Canelo, if he times it, might be able to throw a straight right hand. Canelo could come in so low that Benavidez wouldn't have a choice between his head or his body if Canelo's able to bend at the waist and be low. But understand where the difference is. Benavidez can finish strong. Benavidez is more than 5 years younger than Canelo. Canelo, like many vets who aren't heavyweights, seems to be fading late in fights. That could be the difference in a Benavidez-Canelo matchup. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Let me also point out, too, the style that, in my opinion, would beat Benavidez would be an Andy Ruiz style. Understand, Ruiz is a heavyweight. They're not going to fight anytime soon. But Andy's problem is foot speed. A guy who is insistent on coming in the pocket, like Benavidez is, and trading big shots, would find out that he does not have Andy Ruiz's hand speed. Andy's also a combination puncher, right? So I believe Andy would trade with Benavidez, and I believe Andy has the faster hands and the more unpredictable punch selection, right? The problem, though, and it's a problem, is where do you find guys with that level of hand speed? The other caveat is the idea that Benavidez just beat a guy with superior hand speed to him and used to spar with Bivol, who has some of the fastest hands in the entire sport. Anyway, we can talk about it till the cows come home. Let me end this video at the 41-minute mark. Let me hear from you. You've heard my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I hope you leave them in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.